Today we're going to be looking at some full-frame Cine primes that might just offer the best value for the money in that category. Let's get undone.
Gerald Undone. He's crazy.
What's happening, everybody? I'm Gerald Undone, and if you don't love me at my 1080p, then you don't deserve me at my 4K. So these are the Vespid primes from DZOFILM. For disclosure, you should be aware that DZOFILM sent me these review samples to make this video, but my opinions are my own. They don't get any input on this video's production or get to preview this video before it's posted. Also, I don't have every lens in the range to test. I have the 35mm, the 75mm, the 125mm, and the 90mm macro, but there's also 25mm, a 50mm, and a 100mm lens that I haven't tested, and I'm told potentially a 16mm version that might be coming soon as well. But given the consistency through these lenses that I do have, I feel like we can draw some safe conclusions about the other focal lengths in this lineup. Starting with the build quality. All of these lenses have solid metal construction with great tolerances and a satisfying balance. They're designed to be lightweight and range between 730 grams and 940 grams depending on the model, so between 1.5 to 2 pounds, which is light for a full-frame Cine lens and feels more like a heavy photography lens. But again, they feel well made and will balance nicely on smaller rigs. The focus and iris rings are well dampened and they all have a 270-degree focus throw except for the 90mm macro, which is a 300-degree focus throw. And the 90mm macro is different in a few other ways as well. For example, the rest of this range opens up to T2.1, but the 90mm is a T2.8. And focus breathing is extremely well controlled on the other 6 lenses, but it's all over the place on the macro lens. This is somewhat normal though due to the exceptional reproduction ratio on the 90mm, but we'll talk about that a bit more a little bit later on in this video. Now the outer front diameter of these lenses is 80mm, but they also come outfitted with internal threads for 77mm filters. And the witness marks are crisp and easy to read and come in both metric and imperial. I think these have a nice design and they have a bit of that vintage feel, which remind me a little bit of some of the older Cooke lenses, but overall I'm impressed by them physically, given their price. Optically, they aren't spectacular by any means, but they do better than I expected for their price of $1,250 for a full-frame Cine Prime. I'd say they trade blows with, and in some respects, are better than the Zines, which cost $500 more, and due to their neutrality, they kind of feel like a slightly softer version of the Sigma Cine lenses, but at less than half the price. So value-wise, I think they're doing quite well, even if they aren't the sharpest lenses out there. Since I still have the Sony Alpha 1 at the time of filming this, I figured I'd throw on the MC11 adapter and film some 8K to check the resolving power of these lenses. Oh yeah, that reminds me, these are all EF mount, and at this time I believe they only come in PL and EF mount, but the mounts are interchangeable, and I think DZOFILM is working on some adapters for E mount, L mount, and even RF mount. Now the mount construction is good, solid and smooth, but there doesn't appear to be a gasket or something similar, so I'm not sure what kind of weather sealing to expect from these lenses. Anyway, back to sharpness. When compared to the Sigma 35mm, we can definitely see that these Vespid primes aren't quite as sharp, and that disparity increases near the edge of the frame. But it's not too bad and feels like a reasonable trade-off for the money saved. And one thing I was quite pleased with is the minimal longitudinal chromatic aberration. These are punching well above their weight in this aspect and show an advantage here over the lenses from Rokinon or Samyang. They do suffer from some transverse aberration with noticeable red and cyan fringing, which isn't ideal, but at least this type of flaw is correctable in post. Distortion and vignetting are moderate, nothing problematic, and the vignetting is mostly imperceptible by T4. In my testing, these lenses have a sweet spot around T3.2, which resolves most issues, including the misshapen corner bokeh. I found the quality of the out-of-focus orbs to be quite pleasing when it comes to smoothness and consistency, and in the center of the frame, the wide-open bokeh is very, very nice. There is a little bit of fringing, but quite excellent otherwise. However, when wide open, orbs in the corner tend to get cut into odd shapes, and they can only be resolved by stopping down. Thankfully, like I said, this is mostly fixed by T3.2 and is completely resolved by T4, and the 16-bladed aperture does well at those levels to maintain a circular appearance. So like I mentioned in the beginning, these lenses aren't spectacular, but they're solid and definitely better than what I was expecting for the price. They are impacted by flare in an interesting way though. They don't suffer as badly from a lot of ghosting or spectral glare, but they do quickly lose contrast across the majority of the frame when light hits the lens. For some shooters, this might be a look they'll enjoy, giving a more vintage, dreamy feeling, but you need to be careful of the light coming in at specific angles, which can create this dividing arc of contrast, which is not pleasing in my opinion, but this can be resolved just by panning a few degrees, but you should be aware of it. Color reproduction on these lenses is excellent and very neutral, and most importantly, extremely consistent across the different focal lengths. And the light transmission is consistent too, so you have no problems changing lenses within this set for coverage. And like I said, focus breathing is pretty much non-existent, which is great. except for the 90mm macro, which breathes an obscene amount. But this is fine because this lens is actually capable of a 1 to 0.67 or 1.5 times reproduction ratio, which I was not expecting. I thought it would be 1 to 1 like my Sony 90mm, so this was a pleasant surprise. The witness marks are different on this lens as well, showing the macro ratios, and the t-stop is only t2.8, which is normal for a lens like this. And I was able to compare it to the Sony 90mm macro, which I love, and I found it kept up quite well. The Vespid is not quite as sharp as the Sony, but it's close, and the Sony does have slightly better contrast, but considering that I can focus even closer on the Vespid, this seemed like a fair trade. The Sony does win in the pricing category though, as the 90mm Vespid is more expensive than the rest of the lineup at $1,500 and $400 more than the Sony, but this is a solid metal Cine lens that can work on many platforms with a better magnification, so I still think it's a great deal, and I could totally see myself opting for this lens for any macro shots in the future. I mentioned that these lenses are full frame, but they actually offer slightly bigger, nearly VistaVision coverage with a 46.5mm image circle. Oh, and the focus and iris gears have a pitch of 0.8mm on all the lenses, so great compatibility with most lens hardware. And all the lenses, including the 90mm macro, have a minimum aperture of t22. Overall, I'm quite pleased with these lenses. This is not the first release from DZOFILM. They've already launched 2 other lines prior to this for smaller sensors that have also seen mostly positive reviews that highlight their exceptional value. And I'd say the same is true here. These are by no means perfect, but for the money, they're offering a lot. And if you're looking for a whole set, you can get 6 lenses, so every one except for the macro, and a hard case for $6,800, which is a pretty darn good deal in my opinion. This may not be the most exciting or sexiest launch I've covered, but it's interesting nonetheless, and DZOFILM is definitely a brand I'll be keeping an eye on. But that's going to be it for me. I hope you found this video entertaining, or at least helpful, and if you did, make sure to leave the old thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you did not find this video helpful or entertaining, try setting the playback speed to 75%. Yeah, all right. I'm done.